What's up guys, this is Joseph with Slidio Studios, and today we're going to be taking a look at some cinematic gimbal shots that you can use for your next film project. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So this first shot that we're looking at is just a very simple walking and falling shot. It's pretty basic, and it's a great way to introduce your character, to see what's around your characters. Very simple to do. All you have to do is you want to make sure that you're walking at a consistent speed as you're walking backwards. You also want to make sure you keep the same distance away from the actor, not just for framing purposes, but also to make sure that the actor stays in focus, so you don't have to really do any kind of follow focusing here, and you just want to make sure you stay consistent speed, making sure that the framing is right, and you should be able to get this very simple and nice shot. Again, a great way to introduce the character, and also a great way for the audience to see what the surrounding of the character is like. So if you're entering a new room, new location, the actor gets to see what's around the character. So the second shot that we're looking at is just an extension of the first shot that we did, and all we're doing here is, instead of keeping it consistent in the tilt motion, we're walking at the same exact speed, but instead we start off with the camera tilted down and slowly tilt up to reveal the actor. So this is a great way to introduce a character, especially for the start of a scene. And it just looks relatively cinematic. The important part here is you want to keep your framing consistent. You want to make sure you're walking consistently, and you also need to know how to operate your gimbal to be able to tilt down. So on the Gimbal S, for example, all we have to do is to keep the trigger hold. Keep holding the trigger, and then that way we can adjust the tilt for up and down movements. Now, it doesn't always have to start from the ground. You can also do something a little bit more traditional way of introducing a scene, is you can also tilt up and down, and this is sort of just a little bit of extension to the walking shots. If you have a lot of simple walking shots, you can add this simply, and it will just up your production level. So this third shot that we're looking at is sort of an extension to obviously the two other shots that we done. And the difference here is we're just moving up and down, which is a great way to sort of introduce, especially if you don't want to introduce the character right away. You kind of want to have a little bit more presence, a little bit more character. You can just simply move the camera up from the feet all the way up to the proper framing, and this is just another way to introduce a character. You just have a lot of different methods, or especially for the start of a scene. The difficulty here is, of course, you have to keep a consistent motion as always, keep consistent framing, but this actually has another added difficulty, and that's when you put your camera, if you're on a gimbal, closer to the ground, you will start seeing the Z movements, the up and down movements, a little bit more. So you just have to be very careful, really practice your ninja walking techniques. But once you get it, this is another great trick up your sleeve for cinematic shots. So this fourth shot is actually one of the most complex walking shots, and that's just because you have to be able to pan the camera. You have to be very experienced with your gimbal. This is taking everything that we've learned so far to that next level. But once you nail this shot, it will look extremely incredible. You don't always have to do this with a single character. You can have another character walking, so you can introduce two characters at once in a brand new scene. And the difficulty with this one is definitely keeping that consistent speed. So you have to take what we've done in the beginning, which is keeping a consistent speed as you're walking backwards, but now you have to turn, and you also have to keep the person in frame. I wasn't perfect with this shot, but it turned out pretty good, and this is just a great extension, because now instead of just seeing the character from the front or from the back, you're seeing it from all directions. So the character, the audience is able to see the environment that the the character is in, which is very important because the last thing that you want from your shot is the audience being confused and distracted from the room that they're in. And with this shot, you're able to see the whole environment, which is just really nice. This does take a lot more practice, but once you get it right, it's a great shot. So this fifth shot that we're looking at starts off like a traditional walking scene, but what happens here is you transition from the front to the back. So why you might want to do this, you may ask. Well, first of all, it looks sick, of course, but most importantly is now you're introducing the character, right? You're doing a normal introduction of the character, but then you want to be able to get the audience experiencing what the character is seeing, right? And the only way to do this is from the back. So you're able to get the audience seeing what the character itself is experiencing. And the only way to do this is from the back. Of course, you could just simply do a simple cut from the back, but that doesn't, add a lot of depth to it. That doesn't look very cinematic. So by having what seems like a traditional walking scene, then suddenly stopping and having the shirt cover the entire frame and then transitioning to the back really helps. So if you note, with this shot is that you want to make sure that your focus is set from the very beginning. So you want to make sure your focus is set and that you know how far away you should be, or relatively how far. So it might take some practice. Another thing is you want to make sure that the shirt covers the frame entirely. You want to make sure you stop smoothly, so you don't want to do a sudden stop and have very jerky movements. And overall, you just want to make sure everything stays relatively smooth. But this is a great way to introduce a character, then immediately switch to knowing what the character itself is seeing and what the character is experiencing, and get an idea of the environment around them, especially if it's sort of like a scary scene or if it's a new scene and you want the audience to experience what the character is seeing. So this sixth shot is just a simple way to introduce a static character. From all the other shots that we've done is sort of like a moving shot. This is just a great way to introduce a static character. So you can have this character sitting on a bus stop or maybe on a phone or something. The great thing about this is relatively simple to do. There are some challenges, is that if your character is sitting down like the one here, you do have to go a little bit low angle. And like I said, the lower angle you are, the more obvious it is with the Z-axis movement, so it might take some practice. The other thing is you need to be able to stop at the right time to make sure that the actor is in focus. So this does take some practice. And then also smoothly stopping rather than suddenly stopping to, it's sort of like braking on a car, right? Instead of suddenly braking where you're going to have some backlash, you want to very slowly brake to be able to do that. So this might take some practice just to get it right, but once you get it right, it looks great. You can also do things like follow focus. If you have a larger production team, if you have someone dedicated for following focus, I tend to find that, for a shot like this, you don't really need to keep the focus on all the time. I feel like that could be a little bit more distracting. I kind of like the out of focus view, but this is just dependent on you. But again, this is a great way to introduce a character. So this seventh shot is basically the same thing, introducing a static character, but this is a little bit different than our other shot, and this is sort of like an arcing shot, and this is great for if the character is on a phone call with another person. You want to show a new scene with that new character that someone is talking to, then this is great for an arcing shot like that. And it's also great for if they're texting or if they're arguing over the phone or something like that. Sort of like a reveal of the character. This just is overall pretty nice. The difficulty with this is that it's arcing, so you got to walk in a very specific pattern. You got to keep that same distance once again as you're arcing, so that the character itself is in focus. So this shot here is a very great way to end a scene, or maybe to move from a different room. So traditionally, if you want to move to a different room, right, or a different environment rather, you would need the character to continuously walk throughout the whole frame until they enter a door or something. So this is just a very quick way of doing that instead of wasting all that time, which is not really needed. You can have an object that covers the entire frame and just sort of smoothly transition, or a great way, like in this case, in this example, we sort of just ended it and usually this will be a great way to show the credits. So the challenges with this is, of course, you got to keep at a consistent motion so that you can add that transition later in your editing software. And then, of course, after you're done filming, you need to make sure the transition itself is smooth. But this is a great way to end a scene, to change to a different environment without it looking kind of rough. It's just a very fluid motion in general. And you don't always have to have something that covers from the side. You can also have something that covers from the top. There's a lot of different ways to experiment with it. We're sort of here just to tell you one way to do it, and you can experiment with a lot of possibilities. And the last shot here is just a simple arcing shot around a character. This is a great way to show the emotions of the character, especially for sadness, or even if the character itself is excited. This is a very, very nice way to do that. The challenges with this, of course, is you have to walk in a circle in a consistent motion, keeping the same distance and also keeping a relatively good framing. But this is a very important technique to have in the field, just because this is such a great way, especially if you're just having one character, you want to really show the emotion of that character without using dialogue. This is a great way to do that by spinning around, and it really gets the audience in the zone with the character. It's a very great way of doing that. So yeah, these are some very cool gimbal shots for your next film. I hope you found this video useful. These are great ways to introduce a character, to add a little bit more depth than just a static shot. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time with another video.